They say Hollywood only imagines the future. But what if some filmmakers weren't imagining anything at all? For decades, buried deep inside restricted military archives and black-budget programs, the U.S. government developed technologies so advanced, so classified, that even senior officials were denied access. Projects without names, research without paper trails, experiments that officially never existed. And yet, somehow, fragments of these secrets appeared on movie screens years, sometimes decades before the information was ever declassified. In the late 1960 seconds, a sci-fi film depicted a mind isolation chamber identical to the sensory deprivation units later revealed in Project MKUltra documents. In the 1970 seconds, another film showed a stealth aircraft design eerily close to the classified blueprints of Have Blue, the prototype that would eventually evolve into the F-117. In the early 1980 seconds, a thriller featured satellite tracking interfaces that matched diagrams from a surveillance program still fully redacted to this day. Coincidence? Prediction? Or something else? Hollywood has always had consultants, advisors, experts, former military personnel, people who help the script feel realistic. But a strange pattern emerges when digging deeper. Writers who once worked in intelligence units, directors who stopped giving interviews, designers who admitted certain visuals came from someone they weren't allowed to name, and productions that suddenly changed direction after mysterious government visits. Tonight, we open a file marked Restricted Access. A file containing 15 sci-fi films from Hollywood's golden decades movies, rumored to be inspired not by creativity, but by real government black projects lurking beneath layers of secrecy. Some of these films predicted classified technology with unsettling accuracy. Others mirrored programs the public wasn't supposed to know existed, and a few went too far. Welcome to Classified Futures, where cinema and conspiracy overlap, where fiction and forbidden knowledge blur together, and where every frame raises the same chilling question: what did these filmmakers know, and who told them? 1. Close Encounters of the Third Kind, 1977. Among all films suspected of drawing from classified programs, Close Encounters stands alone, its details so precise, so eerily aligned with real government investigations that former intelligence officers have privately called it too accurate. During the 70 seconds, the U.S. Air Force and other agencies ran numerous unidentified aerial phenomena studies under labels like Project Blue Book, Sign, and Grudge. While the public was fed polite dismissals, the classified side of these programs described objects performing instantaneous acceleration, angular shifts, and electromagnetic anomalies, details not disclosed until decades after Spielberg's masterpiece. Yet the film depicts color-coded light communication sequences, electromagnetic interference identical to declassified reports, behavioral effects on witnesses, and formation flight patterns matching early radar logs. Even the design of the mothership mirrors sketches in later released documents, drawings the filmmakers supposedly had no access to. Then there's the strangest rumor. A consultant claiming to be formerly with Air Intelligence reviewed several of the movie's key scenes and quietly approved them without requesting changes. His identity was never revealed. Spielberg later admitted he was told things that made me sleep badly for weeks. Was Close Encounters simply the ultimate cinematic dream, or a controlled leak from someone who wanted the world to see a fraction of the truth? 2. The Terminator, 1984. Most viewers see The Terminator as a time travel action epic about killer machines. But beneath the explosions lies something stranger: the film's uncanny resemblance to real classified research into autonomous targeting systems, predictive combat algorithms, and self-learning weapons platforms. At the height of the Cold War, DARPA and other military labs explored the idea of machines that could identify, pursue, and neutralize targets without human input. These programs, some later tied to early neural network prototypes, were buried under codename-laden black budgets. Their existence wasn't publicly confirmed until heavily redacted documents surfaced in the late 1990 seconds. Yet the Terminator showcases realistic threat evaluation overlays, biometric targeting logic, adaptive pursuit behavior, and decentralized machine communication, all decades before these technologies were acknowledged. Even the film's concept of a Skynet-type network echoes internal memos describing autonomous battlefield integration documents the public was never meant to see. James Cameron has always credited dreams and imagination for his script. But a lesser-known fact: a technical consultant who briefly worked on the film had prior ties to military robotics divisions. He refused to discuss specifics, saying only that the script was closer to reality than people think. Were the filmmakers merely prophetic? Or did the Terminator brush against the outline of classified autonomous weapons research long before its time? 3. War Games, 1983. When War Games was released, it was brushed off as an entertaining what-if hacker fantasy. But the deeper one looks, the more the film resembles a shockingly accurate depiction of classified military network vulnerabilities, information that was absolutely not public in 1983. During the early 80 seconds, the Department of Defense was quietly battling a wave of unauthorized penetrations into experimental computer systems, including early command and control networks. None of these breaches were publicly acknowledged at the time. Instead, they were buried in classified incident reports under veiled labels like foreign signal anomalies and unauthorized remote queries. Yet War Games portrays remote intrusion into NORAD-linked systems, backdoor authentication exploits, realistic modem-based dialing techniques, and early artificial decision protocols, all with startling accuracy. The film's depiction of WOPR, the autonomous escalation computer, mirrors classified studies involving predictive decision models later declassified under the Strategic Computing Initiative. Even the nuclear launch menu screens in the film resemble diagrams that would surface in FOIA releases 15 years later. But the most disturbing detail comes from production history. The Pentagon initially refused to cooperate with the film, then suddenly withdrew objections after a private, off-record meeting. A writer later claimed they were visited by individuals who suggested corrections that were too specific to be guesses and warned them not to depict certain system vulnerabilities. The question remains, how did a team of Hollywood writers anticipate classified cyber warfare concerns long before the public knew such vulnerabilities existed? 4. Blue Thunder, 1983. Blue Thunder is remembered as a high-octane action thriller about a militarized surveillance helicopter, but its true significance lies in its stunning depiction of urban observation technologies that were almost entirely hidden from the public in the early 1980 seconds. At the time, real military contractors were developing advanced stabilization platforms, low-light imaging systems, and directional microphone arrays under classified budgets. These systems were designed for covert urban operations programs that wouldn't be openly acknowledged for decades. Yet the helicopter in Blue Thunder features a gyro-stabilized camera rig identical to prototypes later revealed in declassified Pentagon documents, thermal imaging views that match early forward-looking infrared, FLIR systems, whose technical specs were still highly restricted, and most surprising of all, a whisper mode resembling classified acoustic dampening experiments conducted at Groom Lake and other restricted bases. The film's accuracy wasn't coincidental. Multiple crew members hinted that an unnamed consultant believed to be ex-military provided diagrams and insisted on real-world authenticity. Some even claim that certain features planned for the fictional helicopter were toned down because they resembled classified hardware too closely. Shortly after the film's release, reports surfaced that government officials visited the studio, ostensibly for security checks. What they were checking remains a mystery. Was Blue Thunder merely a gritty techno-thriller, or a glimpse of surveillance capabilities the government had hoped to keep buried? 5. Millennium 1989. On its surface, Millennium is a time-travel thriller about agents from the future abducting people from doomed aircraft. But what makes the film truly unsettling is its eerie resemblance to real-world classified aviation anomalies, including incidents involving unexplained flight disruptions and signal interference phenomena, later acknowledged in heavily redacted FAA and military reports. During the late Cold War, the U.S. Air Force studied temporal inconsistencies in radar tracking sudden lapses where aircraft signatures disappeared or reappeared without explanation. Although officially dismissed as technical errors, internal documents reveal discussions about unknown aerial intrusions and unexplained gaps in flight telemetry. Strangely, Millennium depicts these anomalies with near-perfect accuracy. The vanishing blips, the corrupted black box recordings, the unexplained instantaneous system resets. Even the film's depiction of replacement cadavers echoes classified exercises involving crash site simulations designed to test disaster response integrity. Production insiders later mentioned that certain cockpit screen graphics were based on real reference materials, provided by a consultant whose name never appeared in the credits. One designer said the consultant corrected aviation details with a level of specificity that only someone inside a restricted program would know. The same consultant reportedly cautioned the team not to portray certain radar sequences too realistically. Was Millennium simply an imaginative twist on the time travel genre? Or did it draw from actual classified aviation anomalies the public was quietly shielded from? 6. Firestarter 1984. While Firestarter is often framed as a simple Stephen King adaptation about pyrokinetic abilities, the film contains elements that uncannily mirror classified research conducted under MKUltra's chemical and behavioral subprograms, details that were not public at the time of release. Throughout the 1,960 seconds and 70 seconds, intelligence agencies explored extreme-edge biological responses triggered by psychoactive compounds, stress manipulation, and neural overstimulation. These experiments often focused on inducing altered states, enhanced reflexes, or uncontrolled emotional surges. Much of this work was buried beneath layers of code names and shell organizations, with only scraps emerging after years of declassification efforts. Yet Firestarter depicts the aftermath of a covert drug experiment complete with behavioral anomalies, unpredictable neurological activation, and the appearance of latent abilities. Though fictionalized, the mechanisms shown in the film correlate disturbingly well with descriptions found in redacted MKUltra memos released nearly 2 decades later. Even the facility's sterile architecture and observation methods resemble real research units that remained classified through the 80 seconds. The most striking detail is the film's portrayal of psychic ignition, a fictional concept yet remarkably similar to experimental reports involving extreme autonomic responses and abnormal thermal signatures detected during stress-induced tests. These reports were completely unknown to the public in 1984. A production rumor only deepens the intrigue. One advisor reportedly objected to how closely the script mirrored certain historical projects, insisting on small changes to avoid unwanted attention. He never disclosed which agency he had worked for. Was Firestarter merely a dramatic adaptation, or a near-accurate reflection of experiments that were never meant to see the light? 7. The Hidden 1987. Beneath its pulpy surface, a fast-paced thriller about a parasitic alien entity. The Hidden conceals something stranger, a depiction of entity transfer and host overriding behavior that aligns with redacted case studies from classified psychological operations research. Throughout the 1,970 seconds and early 80 seconds, several intelligence agencies experimented with behavioral mimicry, rapid identity reassociation, and dissociative state induction. Publicly, these programs never existed. Privately, fragments of documentation suggest that select research units studied individuals who displayed sudden, drastic personality shifts after exposure to extreme psychological stimuli. These files remained hidden for decades. Yet The Hidden portrays a version of this phenomenon with unsettling clarity. The abrupt personality conversions, the fluid transition of behavioral patterns from one person to another, the inexplicable bursts of violence followed by complete emotional flatness. While framed as alien possession, the mechanisms shown reflect descriptions found in now declassified psychological operations, memos, documents no civilian filmmaker should have been able to reference. Adding to the intrigue, one of the film's consultants had previously worked in a military behavioral science division. His role on the production was never fully explained, and interviews about his involvement faded quietly after the film's release. Even more curious, the antagonist's movements, its unnatural calmness, its target fixation mirror traits listed in a classified behavioral override study that wouldn't be disclosed until well into the 2000s. Was The Hidden merely an imaginative sci-fi thriller? Or did its creators stumble upon patterns rooted in experiments the public was never supposed to know? 8. Brainstorm 1983. Brainstorm is often remembered for its immersive memory recording sequences, but the film's true legacy may be its eerie overlap with classified neurointerface research conducted during the late Cold War. Although public science in the early 80 seconds had only begun discussing neural mapping and bioelectronic feedback, classified DARPA and NSA-funded projects were already experimenting with primitive brain signal harvesting. None of these efforts were disclosed to the public. No details were available. Yet Brainstorm visualizes technologies that mirror later declassified schematics with uncanny precision. The device used in the film, the sensory capture headband, resembles prototype EEG harness units developed under programs whose existence wasn't admitted until the 2000s. The depiction of encrypted neural data transmission echoes confidential research into cognitive signal encoding, a term that didn't appear in public academia for nearly 2 decades. Even the film's concept of experience replay mirrors early classified notes on memory stimulation. And then there is the infamous production tragedy, actress Natalie Wood's mysterious death, which led to rumors never confirmed but never fully dismissed that individuals connected to defense contractors had visited the set shortly before filming halted. Some claim these visits were strictly technical consultations. Others insist they were concerned about how accurately the film depicted certain classified concepts. One crew member later said, "Some of the equipment we were told to build looked like nothing in published science, but someone insisted it looked exactly right." Was Brainstorm simply a bold, creative leap, or did it brush too close to a field the government quietly pursued behind locked doors? 9 THX 11381971. At first glance, THX 1138 appears to be a bleak, minimalist vision of a dehumanized future, but beneath its stark surfaces lies something far more unsettling. The film's astonishing resemblance to real classified behavioral control experiments the public wouldn't learn about until years later. During the 1,960 seconds and early 70 seconds, several covert U.S. agencies explored chemical compliance programs, sensory manipulation environments, and emotional suppression protocols. Most of these efforts were concealed under funding shells that never appeared in public budgets. Many details would not be revealed until heavily redacted MKULTRA and behavior modification documents were declassified decades later. Yet THX 1138 portrays these techniques with clinical precision. The chemically regulated workforce, the emotion-blunting pharmaceuticals, the blank white chambers designed to overwhelm the senses and erase individuality. These elements mirror specific methods referenced in documents that should not have been accessible to the film's creators in 1971, not even indirectly. Even the film's surveillance architecture, with its omnipresent biometric triggers and automated compliance announcements, resembles classified concepts from early predictive behavior monitoring systems. What deepens the mystery is George Lucas's early association with communications and engineering departments that often collaborated with government contractors. Although there's no proof he accessed classified material, several crew members stated that technical advisors reviewed production designs, offering corrections that seemed oddly specific for a dystopian fiction. One production assistant later recalled, "They weren't helping create a fictional world, they were making sure we didn't portray something incorrectly." Did Lucas unknowingly tap into the shadows of real classified behavioral programs? Or was someone behind the scenes subtly guiding the film's disturbing accuracy? 10 Altered States 1980. Altered States has long been associated with psychedelic experimentation, but its truest mystery lies in its depiction of sensory deprivation research and neurochemical testing elements that mirror details from classified subprojects of MKULTRA that only surfaced decades later. The film's isolation tank, with its fluid suspension system and calibrated temperature regulation, is stunningly close to experimental tanks described in documents once marked "Do Not Disseminate." Its portrayal of neural regression triggers, induced hallucinations, and cognitive disassociation aligns with protocols reportedly tested on volunteer subjects during the government's covert mind alteration era. Most unnerving is the film's focus on cross-species genetic memory, a bizarre concept that, according to heavily redacted files, was indeed discussed in a fringe biological psychology unit funded through cutout organizations in the 1,960 seconds. No public source in 1980 referenced these discussions, yet the film presents them with startling clarity, almost as if the writers had access to whispers from deep inside classified research circles. Production rumors claim that a consultant visited set meetings, offering corrections to equipment placement and tank design. His affiliation was never disclosed. One crew member later remarked, "He talked like someone who'd actually been inside those facilities, wherever they were." Was Altered States merely a work of creative madness, or a thin veil over experiments the government prefers to keep in the dark? 11. The Manhattan Project, 1986. Although marketed as a teen thriller about a gifted student who builds a nuclear device, the Manhattan Project contains layers of technical detail far beyond what any public source in 1986 could provide. The film's depiction of weapons-grade material handling, radiation shielding, and containment protocols is disturbingly precise, too precise. According to several former lab personnel who weighed in years later, declassified reports now confirm that, during the early 1980 seconds, the Department of Energy and certain military contractors were engaged in classified transport simulations related to fissile materials. Some of the protective case designs and access lock mechanisms portrayed in the film resemble these classified models. Even the layout of the fictional research facility bears similarities to a real lab whose floor plans were not declassified until 2001. Most curious of all is the film's portrayal of vault breach timing, the exact seconds needed for pressure lock overrides, cooling window vulnerabilities, and manual bypass routes. These sequences match internal security studies that were absolutely unavailable to the public. The screenwriter later admitted that someone with a government background reviewed the script and provided technical notes. He never identified this person, and the studio reportedly discouraged follow-up questions. So, was the Manhattan Project simply a clever dramatization? Or was it shaped by someone with first-hand experience in nuclear security protocols the public wasn't supposed to see? 12. Capricorn 1. 1977. When Capricorn 1 premiered, audiences assumed it was an exaggerated thriller about a faked Mars landing. But the film's true intrigue lies not in its conspiracy plot, but in its strange overlap with real classified aerospace tests occurring at the exact same time the movie was being produced. Throughout the early 1970 seconds, NASA and the Department of Defense quietly collaborated on several off-the-record simulation programs, training modules, environmental chambers, and communications blackout protocols that were never meant to be disclosed. These exercises were designed not for astronauts, but for covert aerospace pilots testing prototypes that didn't officially exist. Much of this work was buried under layers of budget obfuscation, yet Capricorn 1 portrays these secretive procedures with unnerving precision. The fake mission control with its staggered latency signals, the remote desert testing grounds mirroring restricted zones used for classified high-altitude vehicle trial. The flight telemetry displays eerily similar to interfaces that wouldn't be publicly shown until the 1982nd. Even more unsettling, the film includes a staged isolation room sequence that matches descriptions from a long-rumored DoD psychological endurance program, one that wasn't acknowledged until heavily redacted files appeared decades later. Then there's the production rumor. A technical consultant reportedly visited the set, introducing himself only by his first name and offering corrections to the control room equipment. When asked which agency he represented, he simply replied, "One that prefers its name not be used." Did Capricorn 1 merely capitalize on public distrust after Watergate, or did it echo aspects of aerospace black projects the government hoped would remain hidden? 13. The Andromeda Strain, 1971. When the Andromeda Strain premiered, audiences were captivated by its stark realism, the sterile labs, the multi-level containment procedures, the coded security systems. But the film's unsettling accuracy raised eyebrows inside scientific and intelligence communities alike. How could a Hollywood production depict biocontainment protocols that wouldn't be publicly acknowledged until decades later? During the late 1960 seconds, the U.S. military and several classified research programs were experimenting with extraterrestrial contamination scenarios. Though planetary quarantine wasn't an official public doctrine, internal documents show that agencies were already drafting protocols for unknown pathogens introduced via satellites, space probes, or experimental aerospace material. These documents remained hidden until Freedom of Information Act requests brought fragments to light. Yet the Andromeda Strain portrays procedures nearly identical to these classified protocols. The multi-tiered decontamination steps, the airlock pressure gradients, the fully automated sterilization chambers, even the computer-driven assessment models used to determine contamination risk. Some of these technologies were not publicly disclosed in 1971, but the film treats them as standard operational tools. And then comes the most puzzling aspect. Michael Crichton once hinted that his research wasn't entirely sourced from open literature. The production designer later admitted that a consultant with government connections reviewed the lab sets and made very specific corrections. Was the Andromeda Strain merely an exceptionally researched film, or did it reveal fragments of a classified biocontainment doctrine long before the world knew it existed? 14. Silent Running, 1972. On the surface, Silent Running appears to be nothing more than a melancholic environmental sci-fi film. But beneath its quiet, emotional storytelling lies a blueprint for something far more secretive. Early U.S. Air Force concepts for long-duration orbital habitats projects that remained classified for decades. Throughout the 1,960 seconds, the military explored the possibility of maintaining covert platforms in space, isolated laboratories, surveillance outposts, even biological preservation units that could operate without detection. Yet none of these plans were made public. Most were buried under projects like Blue Gemini and Manned Orbiting Laboratory (MOL) programs, whose true nature is still debated today. What makes Silent Running suspicious isn't just its setting, but its technical precision. The greenhouse domes in orbit mirror structural concepts from MOL's unredacted diagrams. The drone's maneuver protocols match early notes on autonomous maintenance units technology far beyond civilian knowledge in 1972. Even the thruster patterns and orbit correction sequences shown in the film correspond to real engineering language found in documents declassified nearly 40 years later. Adding to the mystery, the movie's effects team quietly acknowledged that some of their spacecraft references came from Air Force material we can't discuss, and the lead designer once joked that the drones were based on something the military wished they had. Why would a simple eco-sci-fi film contain details so close to top-secret military architecture? Was the production simply gifted with exceptional technical intuition? Or did someone behind the scenes provide models based on classified orbital concepts never intended for public release? 15. Colossus, the Forbin Project, 1970. Long before the public ever heard about autonomous weapons, decision-making algorithms, or military systems capable of operating without human oversight, Colossus, the Forbin Project delivered a chilling portrayal of a supercomputer that seizes control of global defense infrastructure. At the time of the film's release, the idea seemed like pure paranoia. A machine dictating nuclear policy? A sentient defense network? It looked like exaggerated Cold War fear-mongering, except for one detail. U.S. defense labs were already building something eerily similar. Declassified fragments from the late 1960 seconds reveal that DARPA was quietly exploring predictive analysis systems capable of assessing threats faster than human operators. Some documents even reference autonomous escalation models, a term that remained buried until researchers uncovered it in the early 2000s. Strangely, Colossus showcased many of these concepts with uncanny accuracy, despite the fact that not a single one was public at the time. The film's interface designs mirror layouts later seen in early NORAD prototypes. The logic behind Colossus's rational escalation resembles internal defense theories that weren't declassified for 30 years. Even the underground command facility resembles sketches of a secure command bunker built in the same era information that wasn't revealed until decades later. And here's where things get truly odd. Several members of the production team had previously collaborated with unnamed technical consultants. One of the designers later admitted he had visited a facility where doors had no signs and people didn't make eye contact. When asked how the team achieved such realism, he simply replied, "We were told what not to change." Was Colossus merely a cautionary tale, or a thinly veiled glimpse of a real program the public was never meant to know? Bonus: The Philadelphia Experiment, 1984. Among all films speculated to be linked with classified government research, The Philadelphia Experiment remains the most controversial. Unlike the other films in this list, works merely suspected of drawing from restricted concepts. This one is rooted directly in a legend long associated with covert Navy experiments, electromagnetic field manipulation, and rumored attempts at radar invisibility. Officially, the real Philadelphia Experiment never happened. Unofficially, scattered testimonies, unexplained naval records, and peculiar eyewitness accounts suggest something unusual may have taken place in the 1,940 seconds. Whether it was an early precursor to stealth technology, a classified electromagnetic warp test, or simply misunderstood wartime experimentation, the truth remains deeply buried beneath layers of denial. What makes the 1984 film so disturbing is not its dramatic embellishments, but its chilling alignment with elements found in heavily redacted military reports released years later. The film's depiction of a ship enveloped by electromagnetic distortion echoes descriptions from sailors who reported blinding green fog and temporary disorientation during classified tests. The portrayal of unstable field harmonics resembles early theoretical models of electromagnetic refraction systems, concepts no civilian writer should have been able to reference. Even more unsettling, the time displacement effects in the movie mimic bizarre neurological symptoms described in obscure VA medical records tied to unidentified naval incidents. And then there's the production rumor. During the film's development, an unnamed retired Navy engineer approached the writers, offering technical corrections. He refused to give his full name, declined payment, and insisted he was merely ensuring the story was less wrong than it could have been. His notes reportedly included specific warnings about field frequencies, exposure durations, and compartment layouts details, strikingly similar to redacted naval research later uncovered. Did the film exaggerate the legend? Of course. But did it also contain fragments of something the government has spent decades quietly burying? Between myth, classified research, and unexplained anomalies, the Philadelphia experiment occupies a peculiar place, one where fiction may be a distorted echo of something that was never supposed to be remembered. The deeper we dig, the more the lines blur. Were these directors simply visionaries? Or were their films quiet reflections of projects hidden beneath 40 years of redacted ink? Perhaps Hollywood was never predicting the future, only echoing fragments of a classified reality leaking through the cracks. For every movie we examine tonight, there are others whispered about, hinted at, or quietly buried. Technologies that appeared on screen long before they appeared in declassified documents. Stories that feel less like imagination and more like warnings. If these 15 films were glimpses into restricted programs, the real question becomes, what else have we seen without realizing what we were actually looking at?